Don't cheer me, I really don't deserve it. But good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here this evening as we welcome Mr. Mathew Baynton for a Q&A. Before Mr. Baynton enters, just to remind you all of the events we have this week. Tomorrow at 3 p.m, we are welcoming Ada, the world's most advanced artistic and linguistic robot, for a one-of-a-kind interview in the chamber. If you have any interest in AI or in art, please come along to that. And then at 8 o'clock in the evening, we have our debate on hookup culture, which should be fascinating, preceded by the hustings for our officer positions for next term and Trinity term. On Friday, we have another event as well, which is Baroness Hale, former head of the Supreme Court, coming at 5 p.m. Now, on to the main event this evening. Mathew Baynton is a British actor, comedian, musician, and writer. He has starred in numerous classic British television shows, from Gavin and Stacey and Peep Show to Ghosts and Horrible Histories, famously portraying His Majesty King Charles II and the highwayman Dick Turpin in the latter show. He has also worked as a producer and screenwriter for many of these shows and others, winning multiple awards. Most recently, he's been working on the American adaptation of Ghosts and on the film Wonka. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Mathew Baynton. Well, I don't think I've quite ever heard anyone have that sort of reception before. So. Wow.
That does dangerous things to a person's ego.
So, Mr. Baynton, before we get on to Horrible Histories...
Are you going to do that for the robot tomorrow?
The robot will be in here at the start, has 2 hours set up. So unless you want to come 2 hours early and give a robot a cheer, good luck with that. Okay. So before we get on to Horrible Histories and the shows you've worked on, let's talk about sort of your early career. Because amongst the long list of titles, qualifications, and achievements I just read out, I missed out the fact that you are a professionally qualified clown.
Well, I don't think that there isn't like a clown diploma. I didn't get a qualification, but yeah, I did. I went to Paris and trained with a renowned sort of theatre, but particularly for clown, this like guru figure called Philippe Gaulier. And lots of very brilliant people had been there, Sacha Baron Cohen and Roberto Benigni and Emma Thompson, and lots of really brilliant people had trained with this guy. And so yes, I did put on a red nose and make a tit of myself. But, you know, it worked out in the end.
What the clowning, I think, demonstrates is that your career through acting has been shaped by comedy. What first drew you to acting, and particularly to comedy acting?
I'm a show-off. It's as simple as that, and any actor who tells you otherwise is lying. I think, yeah, fundamentally that's the honest answer. As a kid, I was drawn to performing. I wanted attention. I think maybe I'm the youngest of 3. I have a sort of pet theory that often people who have to compete for their parents' affection or attention end up on stage because they're like, I can't get enough from mummy, so I'm going to have to make do with 400 strangers. Please love me. And comedy had been, it was a sort of weird thing, like once I was doing comedy, retrospectively I could see that was probably always what I was going to, or what I would be drawn to. Because I was obsessed with comedy growing up, and does anyone know what a VHS is? I would tape every comedy that was on. I mean, was truly obsessed. I would sit and you used to have something called Video Plus, and there was a number that was written at the bottom of all the listings, and you would type the number into the VHS so it would record that program at that time. Sometimes the schedule would change so you wouldn't get it, and you'd get like the 10 o'clock news that ran over or something. But I was obsessed with comedy, all of it, and I would imitate things around the house, and then weirdly in my teenage years, maybe it's not that weird, but I got very serious and morose, and I was still sort of interested in the arts and theatre, but I kind of didn't let comedy figure, because I kind of thought, yeah, when I was younger, I would sort of tit around and be funny, but that's not serious. I want to be a great actor. And it turns out that when I try and do that, people still laugh. So comedy sort of chose me, I suppose, in the end. But as I say, then I kind of realised, actually, this feels like home. This has sort of always been what I do.
Were there any comedians or comedies that were particular inspirations to you starting out as an actor?
As I say, that question was... No, you set the alarm off. As I say, I was so equal opportunities about it, really, that there wasn't... To pick out one, I feel like I would just be leaving everything else out. I mean, I really did obsessively watch everything. I watched pilots. I watched, things that no one would remember now. But it's been one of the wonderful, lucky things of my career that lots of the people I was obsessed with I've since met and worked with. And French and Saunders, for example, always pop into my mind, that I've managed to tick off working with both of them, and Rebecca Front and Alison Steadman, and just brilliant people. But yeah, I don't think there's any... If I were to pick one, it would be Monty Python, because that was something that my dad, he had the records, and he put them on cassette, and he would play those cassette tapes in the car. And so that, more than anything, was part of like our family lexicon. And that's such a kind of lovely, rich memory, that it's comedy and it's funny for that reason, but also it's this bonding, formative thing. I don't know if anyone can relate to that, like stuff in your family. Well, maybe it's stuff I've been in even, but where it becomes like, you might just be at the dinner table and a quote presents itself as a perfect thing to say in the context of the conversation that you're having. And there were so many of those with Python in particular in my house that still are part of the way my family talk to each other. So that probably is the biggest one.
Before we get on to the TV shows, had you read or been familiar with the Horrible Histories books as a child or growing up?
Every time you ask a question, you're setting an alarm off. I hope that happens every time, I really... No, I wasn't, is the short answer. I was aware there'd been a commercial with Rick Mayall's voice for them. And so it kind of had a positive association in my mind because Rick Mayall. But I'd never read them, knew nothing about it when it came up, really, other than those ads.
So how did you come to get involved? It's a very different comedy style to Gavin and Stacey you'd worked with before.
I had got an agent. I can't remember the timeline. Maybe Gavin and Stacey was before that. But all I had done at that point, I think, was sort of fairly occasional guest roles in things. And then my agent said, it's this show, Horrible Histories, and do you want to go and audition for it? And it's on CBBC. And I was like, no. And she was like, why? I said, well, I think if I did something on kids' TV, then you become a kids' TV actor. And, you know, I'm quite young, I'm starting out, I'm sort of very ambitious. I don't want to get stuck in one sort of corner of the industry. And she said, well, have a look at the scripts. Just have a look at the scripts before you say no. And she sent me some of these sketches, and they were really funny, and they reminded me of Python and Blackadder, and I thought, okay, yeah, these are quite funny, like it can't hurt to audition. Still sort of thinking, I don't know, if I'm offered it, I can still maybe say, okay, no, I don't want to do it. And that's what's great looking back is that I didn't ask or know who else they were offering, because they were all, mostly they were people that I'd seen doing stuff live on the circuit and were people I thought were brilliant. And if I'd known that, I'd have wanted the job, and if I'd wanted the job, I would have definitely screwed up the audition. So, yeah, I auditioned, it went well, people laughed, I got offered it, and they told me who else was doing it at that point, and I was like, well, of course, I'm all in. And my agent at the time said, and don't worry about the kids' TV thing, because the great thing about that is that it means no one will see it. That didn't work out.
So you didn't know the sort of core bit of the Horrible Histories cast before you went to or didn't really know them?
No, we were put together. You know, we were cast. We weren't in an existing group, and some of us kind of knew each other. I think I'd met Simon through mutual friends, and I'd like seen him doing stuff at comedy nights, and so there was, you know, people vaguely knew each other, but as a group, we didn't all know each other.
I just heard, I think, about 3 whispers of, which one's Simon? From people in the audience.
No. Really? Stupid death.
There you go, that's the question answered if ever I heard say it. Now, you still do a lot of
Simon's
work.
the best one.
Can we tell the others you said that? That was my next question.
Shit, they might see this on YouTube, isn't it? And Jim, and Martha, and Larry, and Ben. They're all the best ones.
So you still do a lot of work with the rest of the cast. Are you as good friends as you all seem?
Yeah. Yeah, genuinely. We love each other. It's not that hard to stay friends when your job is making each other laugh and sort of. I do get asked a fair bit, like, oh, you know, most groups kind of end up hating each other or they split up, and how's it lasted so long? And I do think there's something about having the right number of people that we're lucky. I've got this theory now that 5+ is quite good, because a double act, if you fall out, you're done. That's it, you've fallen out. A trio, there's someone taking sides when there's a falling out, and that's sort of even worse. 4 people, you get 2 double acts clashing. 5, now you're in a sort of territory where you go, well, these 2 have fallen out, but we can kind of just keep going until they make up again. And we're 6, you know, and so there might be moments where it's frosty between a couple of people, but even that there isn't really with us. I think we'll have sort of ideas will compete, but not people in our group. So we will have passionate sort of arguments about something we're writing, but it's nothing to do with who we are as people and as friends.
Do you as a group have a collective favourite memory from the set of Horrible Histories?
Ooh. No. I wish I could answer that honestly. A collective one, I don't.
Well, we'll do an easy question first.
So.
Do you have an individual favourite memory from Horrible Histories?
It's a really good question. My problem in these sort of interviews is that I want to be 100% honest, because I hate when afterwards I go, oh no, actually, the truth is it was this or whatever. So I'm always hesitating when it's like the first thing that comes to mind, because it's not necessarily the right one. I don't know. What is springing to mind is an afternoon where we had filmed part of there was a Viking song, like a rock song called Literally, which...
I don't think you need to explain, I think.
No. Modesty forbids me from assuming that you know everything. And we filmed, there's stuff on the beach that you all know. Was filmed at Camber Sands, and it was like the end of the day, and the light was going, and the tide was really far out, and so the camera crew were just saying, go further, it looks great, like the sunset, the light's amazing, go further. We were so far out that we couldn't hear them, they couldn't hear us. And we figured, and so they were just blasting the song on repeat from this big speaker, and we were just sort of miming, presuming it was being filmed. And then, then there'd be a pause where obviously they were putting on another lens or something, and then the song would start again, and I've only just realised you're so close. It's quite disconcerting. And there'd be like a pause, and then and then the song would start again, and we go, oh, they must be filming, so we would just start miming again. And then at a certain point, we realised they were just leaving. They were just sort of packed up and we're heading off. And so we sort of trudged back, and I don't know who, but someone had got like a 6-pack of Fosters, right? Horrible, really. But we sort of got back in the relative warmth of these, of the makeup bus, and cracked open a tin, and it was wonderful. And I do remember thinking, what a way to make a living. I hope this lasts forever. So, it can't, because one day I'll die. And before that, not be as good at acting. Probably not be able to remember the lines. That's just the truth, guys. We have to square ourselves with that.
I'm glad you said that. I didn't want to ruin the mood of your nice story.
You didn't want to ruin it by informing me of my mortality. Fair enough.
We're asking the inverse question. Do you have a least favourite memory?
Yeah. Again, I'll think of an even least favourite, but the one that springs to mind. In the very first series, the schedule was crazy, and this is where I'll get into that territory where you lose all sympathy when you hear an actor start to complain. You're like, you just mentioned that you're paid to muck around for a living. That's the dream. I'm now going to say, we had to film so much every day, and it was really hard. But yeah, they were trying to achieve a huge amount on a really small budget, and so what they would do was print a schedule which was literally unachievable every day. And so every day, we would not complete what was on the call sheet. And I'm going to sound like I'm trying to paint myself in a sort of saintly light now, but that's really demoralizing for the crew in particular, for everyone, but because it means everyone goes home after working really hard all day thinking, well, we failed. So there's just a feeling of failure at the end of each day, of like, well, we were meant to film this many sketches and we didn't get to that last one, or we got to it and we didn't complete it. And so tomorrow then the schedule for tomorrow has to be written, and then you're sort of getting this rising sort of tally of things that haven't been shot, that the crew are tearing their hair out going, how can I schedule it? I don't know how I'm going to do it. And so a few weeks in, that sort of came to a head with a moment where I'd been made up as Shakespeare, which is like a ridiculous look with like a bald cap so that they could make the hair sort of really receding in the way that he was and stuff. And straight out of makeup, and sort of like the first assistant director like collected me from the door to the studio and marched me straight onto the mark that they'd set up for the sketch and said, "We haven't got time for a rehearsal, turning over, action." And I just lost it. And dressed as Shakespeare, like had a tantrum, basically. And I was like, right, you listen to me. I'm not coming in tomorrow until you tell me how the call sheet is going to change, because we never get the call sheet and everyone feels really crap about it and we've got to... And I sort of like huffed out of the studio, dressed as Shakespeare, like standing in a car park going, and then calmed down and went back in and filmed the sketch. But they did change the approach to the scheduling after that. So,
Well, it surprised me was quite a good prompt for one of my more serious questions. We will return to Horrible Histories, which is, you said that the first series was done very much on a shoestring budget. You've done a lot of work with the BBC and publicly funded arts organisations, and you've tweeted quite a lot. I was stalking your Twitter today, I'm afraid.
Yes.
You tweeted quite a lot about funding for the arts, access to the arts, and the fact that you don't think arts and music drama careers get nearly enough recognition or support from the government. Do you think that, what do you think the main problems are that are caused by this, and how do you think this can be rectified?
Well, what happens is that the arts then, which are already, I think, disproportionately dominated by people from a privileged background, become even more dominated by those people. And I would include myself. You know, I was comfortable enough, I had enough security from my family that I knew that I could pursue sort of comedy and going to the Edinburgh Fringe, support myself with a little bit of work, because fundamentally, if the bottom fell out, my parents would step in and I would not be hungry or need, scrabbling to pay the rent. And you have right now people, there are people who are making decisions about whether to heat their homes or feed their kids, and not boil the kettle because they've got to watch what's on the meter. And the idea of then thinking, well, I'm going to go to drama school, if that's your day-to-day reality. And we all suffer ultimately, because then we have a less rich landscape of arts and artists, and that's I'm passionate about it because it's been I've been lucky enough to achieve my life's dream, in many ways. And I just can't believe that it's awful to think that there are talented people who just wouldn't even consider going near it. I do tweet a lot, in particular about Arts Emergency, because I think that's one just fantastic movement, real grassroots, sort of real, proper, tangible, we're making a difference to this. And for those that don't know, one of the things they do is try to they call it the Alternative Old Boys Network, which is to say that lots of people, lots of young people who get into the arts have examples within their family, or their dad knows someone who's like, I'll get you work experience here or whatever. Those little moments where a door is open to you, or where you can believe that that there is a place for you in this world, that come through those kind of personal connections. What Arts Emergency do is try to recreate that for the people that don't have that. And so they pair young people who are interested in studying arts degrees with mentors sort of who are in the industries that they're interested in. And then they sort of they have like a message board where these young people can sort of request, is there someone who works in a theatre who can take me round and let me see the scenic workshop because I'm interested in scenic arts. And these notice boards go up and you can jump, there was someone recently who said that they wanted to talk to a screenwriter. And so I jumped in and said, I'm sort of a screenwriter. I'm also, other things, but that's, Arts Emergency is brilliant. But with all these things, you sort of think it shouldn't really have to exist. I don't feel like I've been as eloquent as I would like to be about that subject, but I kind of find it mad that you even have to put it into words or argue for the idea that arts enrich our lives and that the more diverse the voices in our culture, the more enriched our culture is. It seems mad that we should have, and also there isn't an economic argument for not funding the arts and for not providing those opportunities, because the entertainment industry is massive and it's a growing industry and it's one of the biggest industries we have in this country. So there's just no excuse.
Now, the other big area in where the arts, and particularly comedy, is discussed in the political context in recent years has become certain comedians saying that the cultural climate has shifted such that comedy itself is under threat, that the jokes that people would have made 15 years ago and can't make now represents a degradation in the ability of people to be funny. Do you accept this? Do you think that it's impacted how you write?
It's absolute horseshit. And I can't, Thank you. What you're saying is, I want to be funny in such a way that no one criticises me for. I think, I do think that there are people who are almost like excited at the idea of finding fault in what people are saying and presenting artistically. And yes, that can be hampering in a self-censoring way. It could be that is possible, right? I would say from my personal experience that the extent of it is that you just examine what you're writing, which if you're a good artist, you should be doing that anyway, right? Because you shouldn't be dashing off a first draft of anything. You should want it to be excellent. And so you read it back, and you try to imagine how that might be received by say you're a novelist. How might this be received by my reader? How is my intention what is actually going to be read here? Has something else creeped out of my consciousness that I'm not in control of, or that could be received in a way that I didn't intend, right? So you might by accident have written something that may offend someone. So then you reread it and go, oh, hang on, I've figured out now that I didn't mean it to, but that might offend someone. So then you adjust it so that it doesn't, right? Or you make it so robust that it's clear that it's not. That's as good a way as I can think to describe it. I mean, I genuinely, fundamentally believe in freedom of speech. So, because the problem with censorship is that someone has to do the censoring, and then you get into all sorts of trouble. But I just think the onus has to be on the artist to think about what they're saying and how it will be received. My personal experience is that I think I'm still making things that are funny that I hope are not offending people. I think it's great to attack ideas, interrogate ideas, and comedy has a great and rich sort of history of doing that, and it's a great way of doing that. Interrogate ideas, attack ideas, and punch up and speak truth to power. Like, all of these are great things to aspire to do with comedy. But the idea that you can't be funny unless someone is, I was about to say that you can't be funny unless someone is insulted, and then I realised I'm willfully I think anyone on the other side of the debate would say, well, that's not what I'm saying, you're willfully misunderstanding me. But I'm trying to get, I suppose, to the heart of what is their argument, because I really, it baffles me. I think, for an older generation, there is at least, I suppose, the excuse that they just don't find anything funny anymore, right? And my argument to that is like, well, that's just a function of getting older. And I'm sure that when I'm John Cleese's age, I'll be baffled by stuff that people 50 years my junior I don't know if the math is remotely right there, but so part of it is probably that. It's just like they probably genuinely do watch bits of comedy and go, well, nothing's funny anymore. And they put two and two together and decide that that's because of cancel culture or whatever. But I've waffled.
One of the things I was struck when I was taking great pleasure at rewatching Horrible Histories over the last few days is that Horrible Histories and also Bill and Ghosts and some of the historical stuff you've worked on have aged really very well. Like, very few bits of it, if any, seem inappropriate nowadays. When a lot of comedy shows, BBC or otherwise, from the early 2000s, 2010-ish, do feel quite dated. When you were involved as a writer and more as an actor, did you feel a sense of duty and obligation to portray a balanced, varied, and sensitive view of history?
So first of all, I would say it's very kind of you to say it hasn't dated badly. There are elements of Horrible Histories which I look back and go, I don't think we do that now. Like, we played Egyptians, for example, which at the time was like, well, we're not backing up. This isn't blackface. But, So, I'm alive to the fact and aware of the fact that it will date, and there will be things that you'd look at and go, I mean, I even now I think like, it's absolutely fair, and I still do it, absolutely fair game to do cod French accents. And you I'm often ponder to myself, like, will we reach a point where we're like, well, don't appropriate other European?
The French don't count.
This is it. It's like, but I think what you're trying to get to the heart out of, like, it is what is potentially feeding or at least normalizing elements of xenophobia, for example, and is that an example of something which normalizes an idea of like, the French? Maybe it is. So like that line might change. I don't know. I really don't know. I think your ideal utopia is an equal society in which we can imitate each other, and laugh at ourselves completely equally, right? But that's not the world. That isn't the world that we're in. And the world that we're in, I think, like, it's context. It's context with everything. It's like, in this specific place, with these specific people, under these specific circumstances, is this okay? And that changes over time. I think. So there are things, yeah, I think there are probably, I haven't revisited it for a long time, but I think there are probably things in there that I would wince at now and go, maybe we wouldn't do that. The other side to the answer to your question is me holding my hands up and going, well, I didn't actually produce or create or write much of it, so not my fault, Gov. But the truth is, like, I did some writing on horrible histories on a couple of series, but we all entered it. The cast all entered it as performers, and we frankly didn't question anything. We were just delighted to be doing funny stuff. So all that ever entered our minds really was, it's rude, isn't it? I've got my back to you the whole time. Was, is this funny, and what's the funny way to do it? You know. So we weren't that thoughtful, but obviously now, since we've created our own things, and we do think a lot about that stuff and talk a lot about it. And, you know, Ghosts, to give you an example, when we were creating that show, the initial idea was that this house would just be absolutely enormous and full of ghosts. And so there were going to be hundreds, and we were going to play all of them. And it was just because that's what we'd always done. We'd always played multiple characters. And we made this like sort of taster tape, and we realized, oh, actually the show that the sort of the story that wants to be told here is more about being stuck with people of different opinions and different viewpoints, and it's this sort of Sartre, hell is other people thing. And we thought, well, that means we've got to eschew this idea of there being hundreds of them and stick to a really small group. But then you're going, well, we've got a haunted house, this sort of like British haunted house with figures throughout history of different eras in history. Then you become aware, well, that, whether you like it or not, you're presenting a vision of the history of the country and the makeup of the country. So then it absolutely is incumbent on you to make sure that it's diverse. And that you're not presenting a skewed or slanted idea of what our identity, whatever that means, is. Because that's how it will be read. And it sort of goes back to what I was saying before, like, our intention was just make a funny show where we got to play dress up. But then you're writing it and you look at it back and you go, how will people read this? And you start to realize, well, they'll read this on some level as a portrait of this country.
So the only time, at least I can remember, that Horrible Histories was really quite controversial, and you predicted that I'd ask you about this in my office, was the Horrible Histories Brexit special in 2020, which was, you know, met with outrage on Twitter by people from Piers Morgan and Andrew Neil to Andrew Roberts or whomever else. Do you think you got that portrayal wrong there, or that it was just a wrong place, wrong time, people being sensitive, a culture war thing?
It wasn't
both.
I'm certain it was a culture war thing. I still can't, the thing I can't figure out, and I guess you can't really know, is whether these people are genuinely, I'll just contextualize that quickly, which is that we did a song called British Things in the very first series of Horrible Histories. So I think that went out in 2009 or something like that. So a long time ago. And it was to inform its audience that lots of things that you think of as quintessentially British things came from elsewhere. So I was a butler, and Sarah Hadland was Queen Victoria, and I was serving her morning tea, and she's going, great, my British morning cup of tea, and I go, actually, tea's not from Britain. It came from, you know, and tea and sugar and all these things. And so it touches on empire, and it touches on slavery and, you know, not nice things in our history. It's called Horrible Histories, by the way, this show. It went out in 2009 without comment because it was just so obviously fitting in that show. Then, in maybe questionable wisdom doing this, but CBBC decided to put a Brexit special together. What would that be then? When was Brexit?
2020, I think it was aired.
Okay, so 2020. God, it feels like it was longer ago, that.
I might be my research.
Yeah. And they aired it as part of this Brexit special, but the real problem was that they tweeted to promote it. That was the clip that they tweeted out, and Nish Kumar introducing the clip, and then that, and yeah, Piers Morgan and various others sort of. So this is the point I was coming round to. Is like, they're basically saying, the phrase they used was anti-British. This is anti-British drivel, and why is the license fee being wasted on this, for these people to attack the country that feeds them? What I can't figure out is whether they are genuinely that sensitive themselves about their sense of national identity and pride, or whether they are pretending to be because they know that there's an audience for that. And I think, I'm a cynic, but I think it's the latter. I just can't, so when I was invited and I thought about, okay, I'm coming to this prestigious place and great people have come and spoken here. What can I say, can I use this platform and this audience and say something? And so I was thinking about doing a speech about exactly this. And in my research for it, I read a lot about the stuff around Cecil Rhodes, the statue of Cecil Rhodes here, and I thought, well, this union is really steeped in this debate, and I don't think that me coming and giving a talk is going to give anyone, tell anyone anything they haven't heard before. But it has been, this. Liz Truss said it when she was Foreign Secretary. Boris Johnson said it about how we need to move on from being ashamed of our past. And that's the thing I was sort of meditating on a lot and thinking, well, shame has a really important function. And the more I thought about it, I was thinking about my kids and raising my children and realizing, well, shame, or at very least guilt, is a really important part of rearing a child, right? They snatch off another kid and you intervene and you tell them off, and they feel that feeling, which as I speak about it now, I'm kind of have the sense memory, and I'm sure you do too, where the blood goes to your face and you feel yourself going red, and it's, and you feel yourself on the verge of tears, and you can feel everyone's looking at you, and it's horrible. And then the next time you might snatch, you're about to do it, and maybe you remember that feeling, and you go, oh, I didn't like that. I'm not going to do it. That's what becomes a conscience, right? It doesn't, that's learned through the love of your parent. That's learned through the community, right? That's what we all conspire to do this with children, because we want them to behave well. And I think it's the same with a society, with a culture. Shame has to have a function. We have to be able to look at the appalling crimes of our past and feel something. Feel something. I mean, that's something I learned on Horrible Histories. Like, we laugh about things that happened a few hundred years ago that are hideous. We did stuff about witch hunters, witch finders, the Witchfinder General. when you pause for a second and think about that, there weren't witches, right? It's obvious, but it bears saying there were just women. And they got lynched and tortured and killed. And time has allowed us to kind of go, yeah, we can do some comedy around that, right? We do it in Ghosts, right? But the point is, like, we're not going to go back to that because it's shameful. So it's never time to stop being ashamed, I don't think. But it's just a grown-up thing to be able to say, I can live with shame. It doesn't mean that I can't have pride. I can be ashamed of that and be proud of Shakespeare at the same time. That's perfectly fine. That's just a normal human adult thing to be able to hold seemingly contradictory things at the same moment. And I got a lot of abuse online when that clip was up, and it sort of affected me more than I thought it would, actually, because you sort of think you would just dismiss if people have got idiotic opinions, you can dismiss them as idiots. But then you sort of realise, well, actually, this really matters because it can shape and has shaped to some extent the way our country is going and is governed. The reason I decided not to do a speech is because I felt like it's sort of then just playing into what I think is mostly an invented argument. Because I genuinely do think most of us know that we can hold shame and pride in the same body, in the same mind, right? And so I do think it's a bit of a false debate, because I honestly don't think there's anyone really who doesn't think that. So there was part of me was like, maybe let's just not play into this culture war anymore. I don't know what the answer is, but it's people are sort of, for whatever reason, they're deeply swayed by that national pride stuff. Have you got the answer? I hope someone here has.
I had a heart attack then for a second.
Yeah.
Well, I like doing this to speakers to make you feel old. If that went out originally in 2009, there were people in this room who were 4 when that.
Wow. One of the tweets was, I think it was Andrew Neil said, that people ever suggested that tea came from Britain. Dull. And I was like, well, do you think that babies are born with like the sucking reflex and a preloaded knowledge of exports and imports? This is a children's TV show. Like, I think it's legit to say that kids might have thought that tea was British, because it's very much advertised as that.
It's from Yorkshire, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure you will have enough of me, so I'll open up to questions from the audience, and then we've got a few more, perhaps more trivial horrible histories ones to finish with. But we'll go to the honourable member in the green skirt close to me here. Do you have someone with a microphone? Chloe, is there someone with a microphone? You'll just have to speak very loudly. If you want to. No.
Sure. Did everyone hear that? So I used to do music, and the question was, would I do it again? And would the EP that I released, Dog Ears, would that ever go on Spotify? No, because Spotify's the devil. I have lots of friends in the music industry, and yes, Spotify's just not great. So that's why. Would I do music again? I would like to. I kind of hung up my... it was what I always wanted to do, really, first, and then got into acting. And then I didn't really like the image of the sort of actor with a guitar and the feeling that, like, the audience are probably just indulging a hobby because they like your work as an actor. But I've kind of recently come to the realization that that comes from a place of massive ego in itself, because I'm caring deeply about how it's perceived, and probably I should just do the thing I enjoy. And so at some point, I reckon I probably will do more music, yeah. And yeah, maybe a few people will listen.
The blonde member in the front row there. Oh, microphone's coming. We have one now.
Oh.
Thank you, Chloe.
Hi. So I think a lot of us are here.
Stand up. Oh, no. You want? No obligation, no obligation.
So I think a lot of us are here because you were such an important part of our childhood with Horrible Histories. When you were filming that, did you get a sense of how important it would be to people and to inspire them to pursue humanities and history and politics and all the rest of it?
That's a really good question. And the briefest answer is no. Not like, really, while we were doing it, and particularly at the beginning, but actually way into probably the third or fourth series, whatever, you're really kind of in a bubble making television. And so we were aware that it was going well enough that we were getting recommissioned and we were being re-employed to come back and do more. But yeah, didn't really realize it. At the moment we realized that it was actually, because the thing about viewing figures, or like, you know, being recommissioned, you don't know if people are at home watching like this or if they're like, and it's just on in the background. So we didn't know if it was loved. We just knew it was being watched enough to make more. And the moment we realized it was loved is we did a prom, and I think we were on like our fourth series by then. So it was, you know, it was a good few years of doing it. And when we arrived on the day of the prom, you know, hours before the show, there was a massive crowd outside and the cars couldn't get near, and we were sort of mobbed out, like we would Take That or something. Or One Direction for your generation. Or even that is probably now too old. So that was the moment we were like, oh, this is, people love this. But yeah, with television, you don't tend to... I mean, this was overwhelming walking in here. I have to say, like, I'm a little bit recognised. You know, I'll on a given day, I might get recognised once or twice. But I'm not a celebrity, you know, it's not that level of fame, right? It's people who know my work who will recognise me. It's not, I'm so ubiquitous that you would know who I am regardless of whether you like or, you know, watch what I do. So it's quite weird when they're concentrated in one place. And you're sort of, because it's really, it doesn't happen often. And it's like, oh, okay. But it is amazing. Like, and it's just luck. We were really lucky to be in this show that was really well conceived and well enough executed that lots of people liked it. And I was saying earlier, you know, I sort of always felt slightly guilty about the fact that the living I make is basically just titting around. And by chance happened to tit around in the context of something that was teaching people, and ended up being able to stand up and say, well, I'm a huge part of the historical education of a generation of children. having done nothing to prepare myself for that or earn it. Lucky me.
We'll go to the member here.
Hello.
Oh, microphone coming.
Hiya.
Hi.
So I was just wondering, like, across, Horrible Histories, Youngland, Ghosts, all that, was there ever any time when, someone else got a part that you really wanted?
Oh,
I had that one written down.
yeah. Every part, could I say that? Yeah. I was always jealous of Jim in Horrible Histories when he got to do the ballads, the big ballads. George IV and Richard III, those like big, yeah. I'm trying to think of any other like specifics. But yeah, I mean, we're all greedy actors, so we sort of would all want to play as many parts as possible. And you would read the sketches and go, oh, that's really funny, that's really funny, that's really funny. And then you would just hope that when you were told the parts that there would be a decent sort of portion of ones that you hoped you would get. With Bill, our film about Shakespeare, the plan was that I was only going to be Shakespeare. And my actor envy was so great that I then just demanded that I play one or two of the little funny parts as well. Because I was like, I don't want to just be... He's kind of the straight guy, really. And yeah, so that's the extent to which I have part envy. I was like, no! I want those. Yeah.
We're sadly running out of time, so we'll do a couple of quick fire questions, if that sounds good. Go to the member in the grey shirt over here.
I just wanted to ask a very trivial question, but did you have a favourite character when you were on Horrible Histories?
I get asked it a lot, and I sort of tend to default to the answer that I feel like people want to hear, which I think is Charles II.
Yeah. Right, next
The
one.
king who brought back partying and did a lot of bad
member in the
stuff
scarf.
too, but it's possible to also be...
Well, on that point, I think I speak for a lot of us here when I wonder if you might be able to sing
Later,
for
at
us.
the end. At the end. It's planned. We'll do the questions first.
Okay.
The member in the green mask.
I'm just wondering, obviously you've done what the difference in experiences from, for example, coming in Horrible Histories as a group of performers and meeting everyone, and then kind of doing Yonderland and Ghosts where you're more on the creative side as well, and what the difference is between the experiences.
It's there's something more, ultimately it's more rewarding creating things, and you're responsible for them, and to see something all the way from idea to execution is more rewarding, but it's also much harder. So it's, on the flip side, it's really nice when you just get cast in something and the writing's really funny and all you have to do is show up, muck around, go home, have dinner. So they're both good, but yeah, I think when you make something yourself, it's probably better.
Oh, two more. The member right at the back with the glasses in the back row.
By chance, there were about 5 people with glasses all in that club.
And yet it appears I won. So you talked earlier about reducing the amount of ghosts in Ghosts. So how did you know that the wonderful character that you play, was the right one for you, and how did you know that was the important character you wanted to perform?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we sort of had those characters, but we had lots of others around. And so the intention was, I think we were hedging our bets slightly and thinking, well, if we don't really love that character after a while, we can just kind of start to be more a different one. And I remember, we all said to Larry, for example, the caveman the people are going to love Robin. that should be your main character. And he was like, understandably, because it's like 2 hours in makeup every morning and he's a caveman every day, he was like, I think more the headless guy. I think he's more the guy. So, you know, he gets to be 2 because we couldn't do it to him to make him just be the caveman. So, but yeah, I was kind of like, having played multi-character in all the other things, I was a bit nervous that like, do I love this character? Like, is this really the character that if I'm going to have to just play this guy? But then we kept all the plague ghosts too in the cellar, so we get at least a little taste of something else. But there's turned out to be something really rewarding about playing a single character, but actually even more so about writing a single character over an extended period of time, and something that we had never done before, being able to enrich and sort of get deeper with a character over time, see more of their history and see more sides of them.
Final audience question, better be a good one, no pressure.
They've all been really good.
The member in the black coat on the end of this third row here, also with the glasses.
How different have you found working in the British industry with ghosts and the American industry with ghosts?
I mean, I haven't done loads in America, and you know, it was just a few days out there. I can't really speak to like the differences in the industry all that much. I mean, the difference, one fundamental difference of the 2 versions of the show is that they make tons of, like, it's a network comedy, so they make like 22 episodes, and you know, it's the machine has to be bigger, and it has to be different to churn out that amount of material. And also, like, it made me really freshly thankful for the relationship that we have with the BBC, because I kind of understood a little bit from just a few days I was there and talking to the writers and showrunners just how many notes they get from their executives and from the channel, and like how many cuts they do of each episode. They get like a director's cut, then a producer's cut, then the network do a cut, and they all fight over every bit of the edit. Whereas we are so trusted. We have, you know, that you read a lot of stories about, you know, about channels and how difficult they are and how much they meddle with the talent, and why can't people just be allowed to just make their thing and get on with it. Truly, we are. We don't get much interference at all. We get really clever notes, really, you know, smart notes from our commissioners at the BBC, but they have never dictated the tone of the show or sought to shape it in any way at all, ever. So it's our show that we wanted to make. So it did make me sort of freshly thankful for that.
Well, you certainly managed a much better job of transposing it to America than the In-Betweeners did.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I can't take any credit for that sort of transposition. We gave notes, but fundamentally we thought, well, you know, by accident we have written a show that probably works for reformatting, because it's, weirdly, because it is specifically located. If you just got, I don't know, In-Betweeners is like in a school, but ours is so specifically about Britain that the only way to remake it is to make it specifically about the country that it's in, and therefore there is a reason to remake it. So, you know, they can deal with archetypes of American history and, you know, speak to their country and history and culture, you know.
Now, perhaps against expectations when you were doing it, one of the things that, if not the thing that is most rewatched and beloved about Horrible Histories from our generation are the songs. I've heard some of them played in clubs around the country.
Really?
Yeah. We sang. I remember singing them with fellow interviewees at my Oxford interviews. So before we return to the business from the Man in the Scarf, do you have a favourite song? One you did or one that someone else did?
Yes. Well, I think it's the Simon and Garfunkel parody that we did as Vikings. I literally asked for that. I literally went to the producer and the songwriter and said, "Can we do a Simon and Garfunkel one? And can it be me and Jim?" Because I like singing harmonies, and I thought we'd look funny as Simon and Garfunkel. And I think we did. So yeah, that was fun. They were mostly fun. It's Not True from the first series and I don't know why I'm saying this because I'm literally self-defeating, is the one thing I think I've done in my whole career that I would like to be burned and never seen again. Now I've just drawn attention to it.
Everyone's going to go and rewatch that this evening. So Matt did agree in my office that he would have a sing-along with us, but only if everyone joined in.
Man in the scarf. What's your request? My name is. I said everyone has to join in. My name is Charles II. I love the people and the people love me so much they restored the English monarchy. I pass Scottish, French, Italian, a little bit Dane, but 100% party animals. Champagne, spaniels I adore, named after me too. Like me, they were fun with a natty hairdo. Is today my birthday? I can't recall. Let's have a party anyway because I love a mouthful. Oh hail, the king of bling. Let's sing, bells ring, ding ding. I'm the king that brought back partying. King Charles, my daddy, lost his throne and kings were banned. They chopped off his head, then Ollie Cromwell ruled the land. Old Ollie wasn't jolly, he was glum and he was proud. We'd be mirrors of all sin, only Billy's not allowed. When Ollie died, the people said, Charlie me hearty, get rid of his dollars, come back with rather party. This action's what they call the monarchy restoration. Naturally, it was followed by a huge celebration. Thank you. Still in there.
Now, final question to end on a slightly more serious note. A question we ask all of our speakers. If you could give one piece of advice to the members of the Oxford Union and the students at the University of Oxford, what would that one piece of advice be?
Be kind.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mathew Baynton.